Your voice deserves to be heard, and your story is worth sharing. And in this video, I really want to speak to you if you're someone who's been wanting to show up online, or maybe you've been wanting to share your story on social media, but you felt as though you haven't gone through enough struggle or you haven't overcome enough adversity in order for your story to truly be captivating and to touch the hearts and minds of the people that you're looking to reach. I can absolutely relate to this as someone who, over the past year, has been really leaning into finding my voice online, figuring out what types of stories people actually want to hear, but also being okay with understanding that my audience will come to me when they actually feel drawn to the components of me that they align with. And so I want to go all the way back to like middle school, high school, where personally speaking, I was the only Black person, the only Black woman in a lot of the environments that I found myself in. I know that my parents were very intentional with where they decided to call home for us growing up because of the fact that the county we were in, the specific city that we were in, had some of the best schooling systems in Georgia. And especially with them being immigrants themselves coming to the US, it was a priority for them to ensure that we did receive the best education possible in order to set us up for success in the rest of our lives. What that also came with on on a societal level was the reality that I did, looking back, have a very, very deep identity crisis where in my school I was always in either the honors or AP classes, and the school that I was in, very white, affluent neighborhood. So that meant that many of the only Black students that I saw in my school were choice students. And what that meant was that they came from choice schools, which were essentially the schools that did not pass the state exams. And so they were essentially bussed into my school and were exposed to and afforded the level of education that my school provided. I'm trying not to share too many details about like the city I grew up in and the high school I went to and all of that. But in a nutshell, that meant that the majority of my classes, I was the only Black person. There were maybe one or two of us that would see each other in like, AP US history, AP government, all that jazz. But for the most part, only. Same thing with soccer. I was typically the only Black person. I think there were a few seasons where there was one or two other Black girls on my team, but for the most part, when it came to carpooling, I was the only Black girl in the car. I was the only Black person on my teams, and even on the so we had the club side, and then we had the actual high school side where I played for the high school team as well. Same thing. And I vividly remember being like a loner where it wasn't until I actually got really good in soccer. So this was probably like high school, freshman, sophomore year before I tore my ACL my junior year, where I was actually liked and people actually gravitated towards me. And I think that was a bit of the conditioning that I experienced where I was like, oh, people at school think I'm cool because I'm good at soccer. And that correlation was a bit of conditioning around the fact that my identity was baked in achievement. Now, going back to my parents also being immigrants, there's a ton of sacrifice, of course, that comes with one, being a parent in the first place, as I'm learning the closer and closer we get to becoming parents, but also the reality that there was a sacrifice in wanting a better life, not just for themselves, but for their offspring, i.e., me and my sisters. And so there's an element back home where my achievement was a top priority. Getting A's was a standard. Getting B's, what's going on here? And so these two areas of my life where I spent the most time, both soccer and school, then became the driving force for how I actually felt valuable. And it's taken several years for me to, honestly, it's probably been like the last 3 or 4 years where I've been able to do a better job of detaching the two, where my achievement is not the equivalent of my identity. My value comes from who I am and what all is encompassed in me. And even just saying this, I'm like, Brand, you fully believe that, so we still have work to do there. But I'm less tied to, okay, I have to do X, Y, and Z in order for people to like me. But this goes back to what I had mentioned earlier with being an only, where it's kind of like you have this identity crisis and you wonder and question whether or not what you bring to the table outside of achievement is actually valuable. So now getting into storytelling is like you see the Tyler Perrys of the world, you see the Oprahs of the world, where they done been through some stuff, right? And now it's like seeing their journey and seeing all that they've overcome and seeing, the way in which they've been able to essentially make a name for themselves coming from nothing. There's a bit of a reality where like people will gravitate towards that, right? So then it leaves you as someone who is had a similar brought up C is what they say, brought up C, but had a similar childhood as me, where by the grace of God, like I had a very blessed childhood. I had a childhood where I never had to worry about whether we were going to eat for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I never had to worry about, if my dad actually loved me. Like I had a very, very present dad. I had a very present mom. I had a two-parent household. My grandmother, my nana was, oftentimes in the house as well, helping to raise us. And so I come from privilege, and I come from a place where that looks very different from many of the captivating stories that we see online in the media, etc. And so one thing that I want to speak to, and type of person I want to speak to in this video, is someone who may feel as though I didn't go through enough. Like I don't deserve to, have the spotlight. Give the spotlight to someone else who has gone through X, Y, and Z and can speak to someone who is in a similar position. But I want to encourage you to know that there are people who have experienced something very similar to you, who may be like just two steps behind you, 2 years behind you, two next moves behind you in order to get to where you are now. And they're looking at you like, dang, how did you do that? And thank God, like my husband is, when I say God made him just for me, like, of course, he has the accolades. He has a PhD in sociology, and with that comes a lot of the more theoretical and philosophical approaches to how people interact and why we see ourselves the way we do and all of that. But there's also a level of care and just like ability to listen, understand, and pour into me in ways that have helped me to be like, wait a minute, I do have a story to share. I also went to Bali April of last year and met up with my coach, who the intention and the reason I went to Bali was actually to learn how to find my voice online. So I have my husband at home who is, just really pouring into me. And then I have my coach, Glow, who is one of the best storytellers, if not the best storyteller I know. And so she's helping me more on like the tactical and the strategic way to tell your story. And I started off with short form content last year. So I did a 30-part episodic series called Girl Get Up. And it was essentially helping Black women to understand the beauty and the opportunity and the privilege of traveling and seeing the world. This year, I'm leaning into strengthening that long form content muscle. So that comes with saying less of my ums, saying less of my likes, and being able to articulate my story in a way that has a beginning, middle, and end, leaving people with the experience of like this is who Brienne is, but also with either the empowerment or the light or the joy that I naturally have instilled in me. So if you are someone who, may feel as though like my story isn't deep enough or like I haven't been through enough, I want to encourage you to like pivot and think about how helpful it is, especially in times like this, to have people who are a light. Let me say that again because that might have gone. How important and impactful it is, especially in times like this, to have people who can be a light, who can not bring the doomsday vibes down, but instead share the beauty and share the light and share the joy that many of us are currently striving to hold on to in the midst of all of the ghetto and the chaos happening, especially here in the US. I also think that it's important, like, yes, we do need to hold space for people who have been through a lot. And that's something that in college, there was a very vivid moment my junior year where I was in a room with ladies who we were essentially getting to know each other better. And everyone was going around the room essentially sharing what they've been through and what they've overcome. And this was meant to be like a time of bonding for us to get to know each other better. And I remember everyone in the room was talking about the stuff they've been through with, like, challenges with their parents, challenges with their siblings, challenges with just how they grew up and like the lack that they experienced. And I remember everyone, like every single person in that room said something except for me. And I distinctly remember the internal just like tension I had where I wanted to speak. Like I wanted to feel like I was contributing to this bonding experience. But I also was like, wait, but I haven't been through like nothing that I've been through, even like the hardest thing I've been through. I don't feel like that compares to anything that these other ladies have gone through. And I remember just kind of invalidating my story and invalidating my lived experience. And you can't go back and undo things. And I'm glad that I was able to build bonds on like more of like a one-on-one level. But it's important to also remember, like, yes, hold space for people, but also your voice matters too. So if you have been looking to share your story online, share the good. Like we need to hear more good. We need to hear how you were able to, I don't know, go to grad school in China, or how you were able to start your business from scratch, or how you were able to meet the love of your life. Like there are so many happy stories that we need to hear and see, and you never know if there's someone who maybe on the brink of that breakthrough who just needs to see a light and like inspiration in order for them to do the same. So this has been on my heart. I know like we're in Black History Month, and oftentimes the Black struggle story is the one that gets the most attention. It's the one that brings people in, leads people to engaging. But we we need to share we need to share our joy. There is a ton of joy. There is a ton of laughter. There is a ton of light. There's a ton of camaraderie that is also part of the Black lived experience. And so I hope that this encourages you to open your mouth, to share unapologetically, and to know that your people will come to you. So if you enjoyed this video and if you would like to see more joyful, inspiring, travel based, love filled content, then you are in the right place. That is what my corner of the internet is geared towards. And of course, we'll have our hiccups here and there. Life will throw its curveballs, and I'll share those as well. But for the majority of the content here on this page, we will be spreading light. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in tomorrow's video.